In this tutorial session, we're going to look at quadratic functions, and our focus will be on sketching quadratic functions. Our key objectives will be exploring how to find the x-intercept, the y-intercept, the turning point, and also the axis of the symmetry. So there are two types of quadratic graphs, or what we call the parabolas. We have the maximum parabola and also the minimum parabola. Let's have an instance whereby you've been told that the function f of x is equal to negative 2x squared, then plus 8x plus 10. What is the first thing you need to discover? So the first thing you need to understand here is whether this function will give you a minimum parabola or maybe a maximum parabola. How do you determine so to determine that, you consider the coefficient of the square of x. So the coefficient, we call it a. Is it greater than 0 or is it less than 0? So if at all the coefficient is less than 0, as in this instance whereby we have negative 2, this one will give what we call a maximum parabola. Then if the coefficient of the square of x is greater than 0, then this one will give what we call an instance whereby it's giving greater than 0, then this is called the minimum parabola. So let's now identify the x-intercept. So to find the x-intercept, where this graph intercepts the x-axis, rather, that is what we call the x-intercept. So in the x-axis, we understand to say y is equal to 0. So you solve this quadratic equation, which is negative x squared plus 8x plus 10 equal to 0. Then you identify what is your product. The product is just the coefficient of a multiplied by c. That will give a negative 20. The sum, that is just the coefficient of x, and that is 8. Then the factors, the two numbers, when you add them, they'll give you 8. When you multiply them, they'll give you negative 20. So which two numbers will give you that product and that sum? So to find those two numbers, you just consider the product. Look at the factors of the product. Okay, you look at the factors of the product. So what are the factors of 20? So the factors of 20, we have 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20 itself. Okay, so now the two numbers which will give us the product, negative 20, and the sum to be 8, we can take 2 and 10. Now 2 and 10, we multiply them, they'll give you 20. When you add these two, they'll give you 12. So you need to get positive 8 as the sum. So you can just add a negative to 2 so that you get negative 2, then and positive 10. So if you multiply this, they'll give you the product, which is negative 22. You add them, they'll give you 8. So this is what you need to do. So let's now substitute on B. So you are going to say negative 2x squared plus, or let's start with negative 2x, then plus 10x plus 10 is equal to 0. Then we solve this. So we can just factorize negative 2. Then we're going to have x squared minus 1. Okay, I'll factorize negative 2x. Then here, 10. I'll remain with x. Okay. So they have factorized x, 2x I mean. Let me just write it clearly. So I factorize negative 2x. What I've remained with is x plus 1. There, I can factorize 10. I remain with x plus 1. Then is equal to 0, like that. Then I can group this. So I'll say x plus 1. Okay. Then negative 2x plus 10 is equal to 0. I can now solve these two simple equations. So what I'm going to have, x plus 1 is equal to 0. I'll get x is equal to negative 1. Or for this one, negative 2x plus 10 is equal to 0. I'll get 2x is equal to 10. Then if I divide on both sides by 2, I'll simply get x is equal to 5. So the x-intercept is x is equal to negative 1 and x is equal to 5. So these are the x-intercepts. Okay. Then let's find the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, along the y-axis, x is equal to 0. So that is what you need to apply there. So from the function which we had, f of x is equal to negative 2x squared plus 8x plus 10. So for y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So if you substitute 0 there and there 0, you'll simply get f of x or y will be equal to 10. So to avoid wasting much time, you just take the constant. The constant is simply the y-intercept. So you just say y is equal to 10 is the y-intercept. Then the other thing you need to determine here is the turning point. To determine the turning point, you need to complete the square. Okay, so from the equation we have, which is f of x, let me use a different slide. Okay, so the equation we have is f of x is equal to negative 2x squared plus 8x plus 10. So how do you complete the square? There's a video, you can just search for completing the square. You'll be able to watch and understand it better. So to do that, you just make sure that the coefficient of the square of x is 1. There shouldn't be any other number apart from 1. So what we can do there, we can factorize negative 2, then we remain with x squared. You see, I'm just going to factorize between a and b. I'll just factorize these two terms. I won't factorize anything on the constant. Okay, So I'll factorize negative 2 there. So if I factorize negative 2, I'll remain with x squared there. Then this will be minus, what is 8x divided by negative 2? It will give me negative 4. So this is negative 4x, okay? Then plus 10. At this point now, I'll find what is half of b. So half of b, meaning that what is half of negative 4? Half of negative 4 is just negative 2. So I'll add and subtract at the same time. So I'll say negative 2, then x squared minus 4x. The half, it is negative 2. I'll square it, and I'll subtract again negative 2 squared. This must be in square brackets, then I'll say plus 10. To factorize this in a shortest possible way, whereby you're racing against time, you just do like this. You say negative 2, then you consider the x there, you write x, then you consider the value which is in the parentheses together with the sign, so that is x minus 2, then you put the square like that. Then I'll say minus negative 2 squared, that is just a 4. Then I'll say plus 10. At this point now, I can get the value, so I'll say negative 2, that is x minus 2. This is in parentheses, remember. Then I have minus 4 there. Everything is in square brackets. Then plus 10. So I can now follow this function. So to follow this, I'll just multiply throughout by negative 2. So I'll have negative 2 like that. Then x minus 2. In fact, I can use parentheses here. X minus 2 like that, squared. Remember, this negative 2 is multiplying everything in the square bracket. So negative 2 multiplied by negative 4, that will give us positive 8. Then we have a constant which was plus 10. Then I can have negative 2 x minus 2 square. 8 plus 10, that is just 18. Then at this point, you're even done. You can just say the turning point now will be equal to, you get what is in the parentheses, that is x minus 2, equate it to 0. So you probably get x is equal to 2. So the turning point is 2, comma. Then what is the other value? So the other value is just the constant there, which is 18. So the turning point is 2, comma 18. Then if they ask you what is the axis of the symmetry, to find the axis of the symmetry, it is simply the same value in the parentheses, which is x minus 2, equate it to 0. So x is equal to positive 2. So meaning that this graph is symmetrical at x is equal to 2. Then we get to sketch it. So how do you sketch? So to sketch, you are simply trying to display all the necessary intercepts on the graph. So you just do like this. So have the axis, the y-axis and the x-axis. Okay, let me draw it like that. Okay, so this is the x-axis, that is the y-axis. I said the first thing, determine, is this graph a minimum or is it a maximum? You see, we had the coefficient of x squared to be less than 0. Okay, a we have there is negative 2, so it is less than 0. Negative 2 is less than 0. So what kind of a parabola is this? This is a maximum. So if it's a maximum, meaning that it should face downwards like that. So this is what we need to do here. Let me just try to zoom a bit. Okay, so the graph will face downward like that. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand here is to locate the turning point. What is the turning point? The turning point we got is, where is the turning point? It's 2,18. So that is the turning point. So we're going to write the turning point there. Okay. So the turning point 2, let's have 2 there, then 18 somewhere there. This is not drawn to scale, of course. So that is the turning point. Then this graph is intercepting with the y-axis at 10. So the y-intercept, we found it to be 10 there. Okay, so we need to put the y-intercept. So the y-intercept, we're going to write 10 there. So of course 10 should be less than 18, right? So we're going to put 10 there. So this graph, it's a maximum, so it will pass like that and also go like that. Then the last thing we need to identify here are the x-intercepts. So the x-intercepts we found to be, okay, so they are here, -1 and +5. So you don't have to interchange them. Where there's the negative x-axis, that's where you put -1. Okay, so -1 must be on the negative side of the axis, then +5 on the positive x-axis. Then you indicate the turning point there, that the turning point is 2,18. The last thing we had to explore was the axis of the symmetry. This is not mandatory in most of the questions, unless if per se they have asked you maybe to identify also the axis of the graph, the axis of the symmetry of the graph. But the axis is simply that point which is x is equal to 2. So what they mean by axis of the symmetry is a point whereby if they get to fold this graph, it will look the same way. Okay, so basically that is x is equal to 2, the axis of the symmetry. Okay, so when they are marking, they will simply look for the intercept of the x-axis, the intercept of the y-axis, there the constant, and also the turning point, because this question carries 8 or 7 marks in an exam. So this is how you get to solve and sketch the quadratic function. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and also comment.